Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I have always been the kind of man who valued quiet love. To me, a relationship was built on sincerity, on partnership in the small and big things, on sharing plans and even silences. I had been married to Audra for 3 years, and I believed we had something solid. Something that grew, quietly and steadily, over time. So, when we were having coffee together one random morning, I didn't expect that an apparently harmless comment would change everything. While stirring the sugar in her cup, her spoon clinking softly against the ceramic, Audra remarked with a tone that was almost regretful, "Did you know Corbin was dumped by his girlfriend?" I raised my eyes from the newspaper, surprised. Corbin. A name from her past I hadn't heard in years. I swallowed the piece of toast in my mouth and asked calmly, "How do you know that?" She seemed to surprise herself. She hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to the swirling coffee in her mug. Then she responded, avoiding my eyes. "Oh, I saw it on his social media." I furrowed my brow. "You follow him?" It took her longer than it should have to respond. Yes, I mean, not exactly, but it pops up sometimes." The hesitation was a small thing, a tiny crack in the smooth surface of our morning, but it was there. "Do you talk to him?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She shrugged, a gesture of discomfort. "Very rarely. Every now and then, he sends a hi, asks if everything's okay. That's all." I rested my elbows on the table and looked straight at her, willing her to meet my gaze. "Why have you never told me about this?" Audra sighed, a puff of air filled with impatience, as if my question was exaggerated. "It's no big deal, Leland. I didn't think it was necessary." But telling me that he broke up with his girlfriend, I countered, my voice low. "That was necessary." She went silent for a few seconds. Her knuckles were white around her coffee cup. It slipped out. "I didn't mean to say it. I didn't want you to think anything of it." I stayed quiet. Not because I lacked words, but because I was trying to understand the intention behind it all. The comment about Corbin hadn't been an accident. No one mentions an ex, especially with that note of empathy, without a reason. It was as if deep down, she wanted me to know, as if she was testing my reaction, or leaving clues, even without admitting it to herself. From that day on, I began to view Audra's behavior through a different lens. The messages on her phone that she angled away from me, the shy laugh while she was alone in the corner of the room, her thumb swiping across the screen, the way she would change the subject a little too quickly when I approached. All of it started to bother me, not out of jealousy, but out of doubt, out of a lack of transparency. She was different, and that alone was enough for me to lose my peace of mind. On a Saturday afternoon, Audra was sitting on the couch, typing on her phone. I was across the room, pretending to read a book, but I was watching her. She chuckled lightly at something on the screen, a private, intimate sound. But then she noticed I was looking at her, and she immediately turned the screen face down on the cushion beside her. I said nothing. I just noted her reaction. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the distance between us wasn't accidental. It was being built. Gradually, through the messages she hid, the half-truths she told, the names she avoided saying. That night, while Audra slept soundly beside me, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. The familiar patterns in the plaster seemed foreign, menacing. I tried to pinpoint the exact moment when things had started to change, and everything led back to that morning. That coffee, that phrase, "Did you know Corbin was dumped by his girlfriend?" It wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a thin line crossed between the past and the present, between respect and doubt. And now, even though I still wanted to believe it was just a fleeting distraction, a silly coincidence, deep down, I knew this story was going to unfold in a way I wasn't ready to face. On a Thursday night, Audra casually mentioned she'd have to travel over the weekend. "I need to visit my cousin, Clara," she said, her voice a carefully crafted mix of concern and obligation. "She's in the city, and she's having a severe migraine crisis. She needs help taking care of the house and her little boy." As she spoke, she kept glancing at her phone, as if checking details, trying to reinforce her story with some manufactured naturalness. I listened in silence, nodding briefly. On the outside, I appeared calm, a supportive husband. Inside, something stirred slowly, an old sensation, a ghost from a past life, similar to the feeling of knowing you're being misled, but wanting to be absolutely sure before you react. On Saturday morning, I woke up early. The house was silent, empty. I had coffee alone, my head full. I tried to distract myself by organizing some things in the garage, checking emails, but everything seemed to push me back to the same, nagging question. Why would she lie about this? I thought about the last few days, about how coldly Audra had been handling some conversations, how she avoided eye contact or answered questions with subtle evasions. The pieces were there, scattered, and the sudden trip was another move I couldn't accept passively. After lunch, I picked up my phone. I took a deep breath before making the call. I knew that if I was wrong, it would cause tension. It would be an accusation born of my own insecurity. But if I was right, I'd have confirmation of what I was still refusing to admit. I searched for the contact of Audra's aunt, her mother's sister, a simple, kind woman who had always been warm to me. I dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Hello, dear, how are you? It's Leland. Hi. Everything okay here and there?" I tried to keep my tone light. "All good, Leland. What a nice surprise. Everything's fine here. Good to hear. Look, I just called to check on Clara. Audra mentioned she was sick with a really bad migraine. Is she better?" There was a 2-second silence on the other end, a silence that felt like an hour. "Sick?" her aunt finally asked, confusion in her voice. "Clara's fine. She worked normally this week. In fact, she left early this morning with the kid to go to the park." "Did Audra say that?" I swallowed hard, trying to mask my reaction. My throat felt tight. Then I must have misunderstood. Maybe she got confused with another cousin. "Maybe," her aunt replied, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "But as far as I know, everyone's fine here." I thanked her, said goodbye politely, and ended the call. I stood there for a long while, just staring at my phone. My facial muscles were tense. My stomach churned, a bitter mix of anger and frustration. She had lied, just like that, made up an illness, a family emergency, to justify a trip that now, I knew wasn't what she claimed. And worse than the lie itself, was the way she acted. As if it was normal to deceive me, as if it were just any decision, like choosing what to have for dinner. I spent the rest of the day in a quiet haze. I walked around the house as if trying to find meaning in my own steps. At night, I went for a long walk around the neighborhood to clear my mind. The memory of Audra, her face etched with fake concern as she told me she was going to help someone in need, contrasted sharply with the freshly uncovered truth. And no matter how hard I tried to come up with a plausible justification, maybe she really needed some time alone. Maybe she was confused. There was something worse than the lie. The fact that she felt comfortable using it so easily. On Sunday night, when she returned, the house was silent. I was sitting on the living room couch, waiting. I hadn't turned on many lights. As soon as she walked in the door, tired from her trip, I slowly stood up, crossed my arms, and said without beating around the bush, "I called your aunt." The color drained from her face. She said Clara is fine, and that you weren't there. Audra stopped in the middle of the living room, her overnight bag dropping from her shoulder to the floor with a soft thud. She froze for a few seconds. Then, she let out a short sigh, as if giving in. As if she was tired of the performance. I just needed some time alone," she stammered. "To be at peace, to think a little." "And you lied to do it?" "I made that up because I thought it was better than explaining." "Better for whom?" I shot back, my voice firm, colder than I intended. "Lying is more convenient than being honest." She crossed her arms and looked away, a defensive posture. I just wanted to breathe, to feel like I could make a decision without having to justify everything. It was just a weekend, so why make something up? I pressed, stepping closer. "If you needed time, why didn't you just say so?" She hesitated, her voice breaking. Because I knew you'd react badly, that you'd want to understand, ask a million questions, and you prefer that I find out you lied? Does that seem lighter to you?" Audra then sat on the edge of the couch, her eyes watery. She said she hadn't done anything wrong, that she only stayed at a simple hotel, that she spent the days reading, walking, thinking about life, that she didn't see anyone, that she didn't meet Corbin, or anyone from her past. She insisted she just wanted to get away from everything for a while. I listened, but my face no longer showed any trace of trust. The man who would have given her the benefit of the doubt was gone. "Then answer me one thing," I said, my tone now ice. "Did you distance yourself from me? Or did you move towards something else?" She started crying then. Real tears, born of being caught. I remained standing, silent. Her tears didn't erase what I had already understood. A line had been crossed, And even though excuses kept coming, the doubt had already settled in. It had put down roots, and it was growing. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I had slept poorly, my body tired, my mind restless. I got up, made coffee, and paced back and forth in the kitchen, trying to organize my thoughts. Audra's words from the night before still echoed. She had admitted to lying, but justified it with an empty excuse, as if it were acceptable to deceive someone just to have peace for a weekend. She said she just needed time. But I knew the issue wasn't the time. It was what she did with it when I wasn't around. I spent the day withdrawn, speaking little, thinking too much. It was eating me up inside. I could no longer look at Audra with the same ease. Something between us had broken, in a way that felt hard to fix. She tried to act as if nothing had happened. She prepared dinner, made casual comments about work, but I saw in her eyes a constant discomfort, as if she too was trying to convince herself that everything was still the same. And it wasn't. That night, after a long, suffocating silence at the dinner table, I got up. I grabbed a backpack from the closet, stuffed some clothes and personal items into it, and put on my shoes. I moved with a strange deliberation, as if I had already made the decision days ago. Audra, seeing this, approached slowly, as if sensing what was coming next. "What are you doing, Leland?" she asked, her eyes fixed on my movements. "I'm leaving for a few days," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I need to think." She tried to contain her nervousness. "We can talk. You don't need to do this. I already told you. Nothing happened." "And that's exactly the problem," I retorted, finally looking at her. "You say, nothing happened. But if I hadn't found out on my own, I wouldn't even have known there was something to ask about." Audra stood frozen in the hallway, hugging her arms, her shoulders hunched. "You're acting like I cheated on you." I spun my car keys around my finger and responded. "You may not have touched anyone, Audra, but you lied, you hid things. You avoided, and you chose to build a world of secrets instead of opening up to me. For me, that's enough to need some distance." She tried to interrupt, to offer another excuse, but I turned my back and left. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I simply left, with the quiet firmness of someone who had already passed the point of arguing. Through the window, I saw her watching the car disappear down the street. It was the first time in 3 years of marriage that I had walked out. The following days were a mix of anger and emptiness. I stayed at a simple, anonymous hotel on the other side of town without telling anyone where I was. I brought my laptop, tried to occupy my mind with work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the same scene. Audra standing in the living room, her face worn, trying to minimize what she had done, as if it were normal to make up trips and hide messages. I remembered her words, her restrained tears, the way she avoided my gaze when I questioned her. It hurt because I loved her, and precisely because of that love, the disappointment hit harder. On Wednesday, it was almost evening when I decided I needed to go back home. The decision wasn't easy. Inside me, there was a conflict between what I felt and what I believed. Part of me wanted to truly listen to Audra, to understand if there was any chance of rebuilding. The other part just wanted the certainty that I was doing the right thing by stepping away. I drove back with a heavy heart, but with the hope of perhaps hearing from her a more mature attitude, a whole truth, a sincere apology. I thought about how to start that conversation. I imagined the right words, the boundaries I needed to set, the agreements that needed to be redefined. I even imagined that she might have spent the last few days alone, reflecting, willing to show genuine remorse. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the sight I encountered when I turned the key in the lock and pushed open the door to the living room of my own house. On the couch, with a beer in his hand and his feet propped up on my coffee table, was Corbin. The same Corbin she swore only sent a hi every now and then. The same Corbin, she said, who was part of her past. He was sitting there as if he belonged to the furniture, as if it was his home. I stopped, the door still slightly ajar. I stared at the scene in silence for a few seconds that stretched into an eternity. Corbin raised his head, and with a relaxed, lazy smile, he said, "Hey, man, what's up? I'm Corbin." I closed the door slowly, the click echoing in the silent room. I approached cautiously, without averting my eyes. My heart was pounding, my blood circulating hotter. I spoke firmly, without yelling, but with an intensity that filled the room. "Get up, and get out of my house. Now." Corbin was surprised, his smile vanishing. But he stood up, dropped the beer on the table, and started walking toward the door. "Calm down, man. I just came to visit." Audra said that. "Get out," I repeated, my voice like steel. "Just walk to the door. Don't even finish your sentence." As Corbin slipped out, closing the door quietly behind him, Audra appeared in the hallway. Her hair was wet, and she was wearing a robe. Her eyes were wide, shocked to see me standing there, face to face with him. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice filled with a desperate disbelief. I didn't even look directly at her. I was still staring at the open door where Corbin had just been. "What was he doing here?" I asked dryly. Audra stood still, breathing deeply. "He just came to visit me. It was his idea. I didn't even know you were coming back today." I finally turned my face toward her, the anger still locked in my gaze. "You want me to believe he just showed up, walked in, sat down, and opened a beer? He stopped by chance," she insisted, her voice pleading. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. "By chance? On our couch? Drinking comfortably?" She tried to say something else, but I raised my hand and cut her off. "Pack your things, too," I said, the words falling like stones in the quiet room. "You're leaving. Today." Audra's eyes widened, and she took 2 steps forward. "Are you kicking me out?" "I'm protecting what little dignity I have left." Then I turned my back. I climbed the stairs without looking back, leaving Audra there, motionless in the middle of the living room. She didn't say another word, because any word, at that moment, would only serve to prolong a silence that was already screaming inside. The next morning, I called a lawyer and started the process. I was calm, but it was the kind of calm born from exhaustion, when you realize there's no turning back, that what's broken can't be rebuilt with words. I didn't want to hear more promises, more justifications, or more explanations like, "It was unintentional," or, "You misunderstood." I had heard it all. And now, I saw clearly, no love survives lies dressed as indifference. Audra stayed at her parents' house. She sent long messages, asking me to reconsider, to wait until things cooled down. I read everything, but I didn't respond. I preferred the silence, because silence said more than any speech I could write. In the following days, she kept trying to reach out. She said what happened was an exaggeration, that Corbin really had just shown up by chance, that it was just a brief visit. She asked to talk in person. I refused. Not out of resentment, but for protection. It was as if every new phrase from her was another attempt to soften something that, to me, was unbearable. What hurt the most wasn't Corbin sitting on that couch. It was that she allowed it, with such normalcy, as if everything was fine. As if I, her husband, had become a minor detail in my own story. The divorce was processed without a legal battle. I didn't want money, property, or disputes. I wanted peace. I wanted distance. Audra signed the papers at a small notary office, her expression lost. She still believed that with time, I would change my mind. She said this to mutual friends, tried to justify her actions as a phase, a small mistake with disproportionate consequences. She still hadn't understood what, to me, was obvious. What destroys a marriage is rarely a single, big act. It's the small gestures that erode trust until nothing remains. Months passed. I slowly reorganized my life. I moved houses, neighborhoods, routines. I kept in touch with a few close friends and refocused on work. I avoided social media, parties, events where I might run into people who knew us both. I chose to live away from the noise, the exposure, and other people's curiosity. I was rebuilding my way of breathing, of trusting, of being with myself. The pain wasn't as present anymore, but every now and then it would return, triggered by simple details. A song on the radio, a place we used to frequent. I acknowledged these moments, but I didn't cling to them. It was a process, and I respected each step of it. It was during lunch with an old friend that I learned what had happened. My friend mentioned it almost casually, assuming I already knew. He said that Audra and Corbin had officially started dating, that they had been together since just a few weeks after the divorce. I listened in silence, without any visible reaction. My friend continued, saying they seemed happy, posting pictures together, even talking about moving into the same apartment. I didn't respond. I thanked him for the company, paid the bill, and walked away with firm steps. There was no anger, but something different pulsing inside me, a kind of confirmation I hadn't asked for, but that arrived too late to make any difference. 3 months later, I received a new message on my phone. It was from Audra. She wrote that she had made mistakes, that Corbin had cheated on her with a coworker, and that everything had fallen apart. She said she felt lonely, that she thought about me often, that she revisited our old conversations and realized how reckless she had been. The message was long. It contained confession, regret, and between the lines, a desperate attempt to reconnect. It ended with a sentence that sounded like a plea. I'd like to talk. Just talk. You were the only one who truly knew me. I stared at the phone screen for a while. Memories came flooding back, the good and the bad, but my heart remained quiet. There was no more pain, just certainty. Their story had ended long before the papers were signed. The betrayal wasn't just Corbin being in the house. It was the conscious choice to ignore the limits of respect, day after day. Audra hadn't understood that. And maybe she never would. I responded with few words. Not with coldness, but with clarity. You closed a door, Audra. I just locked it from the inside. I wish you the best, but I've started a new life. One where I don't have to doubt what I feel, or justify what I deserve. I hit send. Then I blocked her contact and put the phone in my pocket. I went for a walk, as I did every afternoon. And for the first time in a long, long time, I noticed I was walking without any weight on my back. Without the anxiety of checking the past at every corner. There was nothing more to understand. And that, by itself, was liberating. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.